Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Mindful Investor Podcast Show. I'm your host, Steve Rosenberg. I am head of education for Mynd Property Management, and I'm a lifelong investor. I am into this journey. If I'm above ground, I'm doing this. And along the journey of me being an investor, I think we all have successes. We all definitely have failures. Whether or not we talk about them is probably a different story, but we all have them. And the thing that I like the most about being an investor and being on this lifelong journey is the people that you meet and the relationships that you have and the likeness of other people that you surround yourself with. And it's almost addicting to meet other successful people because you want to learn from them. You want to educate yourself from them. And what I have learned, which is different than probably most other industries I've been in, is there's not really much of a hoarder mentality or a mindset of, I'm not giving that person information because they could use it and I can't. So it's always been a, how can we help other people community in the real estate investing world. Now, obviously there are people that don't prescribe to this, but I would say the majority of people that do. So my guests today are some very successful investors from the Great White North of Canada, Mel and Dave Dupuis. I get it right, guys?
Nailed it.
Perfect.
Nice.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, thanks for being on today. I was just going to say, I probably will not do justice to what you guys have done. I would say in a short time in your real estate investing career, because you haven't been doing it for 20, 30 years. It's been a pretty compressed time frame. But guys, welcome to the show. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the transition from your past life to what you're doing now.
Yes, great. Well, we're now full-time real estate investors, but no, we certainly weren't always full-time investors. We slowly started building our portfolio, and we got stuck because although we were working 9 to 5, we weren't able to come up with enough money to raise funds to continue to grow our portfolio. So then we discovered the power of creative financing. And that's when we bought 12 properties in less than 12 months. So that was 56 units that year. So that exploded our growth. And since then, we've continued to grow our portfolio. And in 2 weeks from now, we're closing another 69 units. So it's going to bring us to over 170 units. And they're also owned as well.
Now, question, as the husband-wife combination, who was the first one to think, hey, maybe we should try this real estate? Was it a group decision, or was it like one person, Dave started, or Mel, you started, and then that you had to convince the other partner to do it?
Yes. Well, Dave was a big baby, but he loved real estate. We both did. So before we met, I had 2 properties. Dave had 1.
Yeah.
And to share how you knew you wanted to do it, but
I wanted to do it, Steve. It was just the mindset. I was in that consumer mindset. I was scarcity. I was looking at the what ifs, putting all that ahead of what I actually wanted, right? Like making that a bigger wall than it actually was. So I was in my own head too much, basically. Okay. And then Mel got me out of that.
So let me ask you this, Dave, because I think this is important, because I think a lot of people have that challenge. They what if themselves to death and they never take action and they never actually do it. If you could go back and tell yourself a story of what your future looks like, what kind of advice would you give the Dave that was what ifing?
I like that. What I would tell that Dave, a lot of things, but what I would tell him is, every step of the way is not a big deal. It's a big deal in the moment, but after you get through it, after you've overcome that barrier, you look back and you're like, that wasn't so hard after all. I'm capable of anything. So having that mindset would have changed a lot of things, because even a lease agreement, I was petrified. And Mel said, well, here's one that I got off the internet. Let's use it. And if ever it becomes an issue, we'll deal with it. And it did become an issue, and we dealt with it. Like, it's not earth-shattering, right?
Yeah. What's funny is I often think back. I've been doing this since 2002 is when I actually first started purchasing. So 18 years, right? And I go back and I look at the properties that are still here in Houston, Texas, that I could have purchased that I didn't.
Right.
And the majority of those properties that I wish I purchased, that at the time I talked myself out of, the properties are still there. They're still owned by an investor. But I think to myself, why did I not take that action? Now, I also have properties that I did purchase that I should not have, and that I kicked myself for purchasing. And I often think to myself that when I see the properties that I didn't purchase, and someone else did, good for them. When I see the properties that I purchased, those are the ones I focus more on personally, that I did not run correctly, that someone else purchased from me, that they turned around and they were successful as investors running those properties. And it really got me personally thinking, okay, it's still four walls and a roof. They own it, I own it. Why are they successful and why am I not? Or at least with that particular property. And I realized that, number one, it was my mindset, the way I looked at it and the way I approached it and the business model that I wrapped around that property. And I often wonder if people go back, and I don't think a lot of us do, but if you kind of reflect back and you think of deals that you bypassed, and I don't know if you have any, that if you went back and looked at the numbers, you'd probably be thinking like, man, I should have pulled the trigger on that deal, because it's very rare that somebody says, boy, I'm glad I passed on that one, right? 30 years later, right? Do you guys have that? Have you ever thought of that?
There's some that I drive by all the time. They're two purpose-built. I think they were both 18 and 18 plexes. Mm-hmm. And the mindset, again, your mind can be your best friend or can be your worst enemy, right? Right. And we walk through, and yes, there was some work, but there was going to be a massive lift, right? In which that's what we do, underperforming, and then we refinance, pay people out, and keep the asset, no money down. But we were just so scared of 18 doors. Like, oh my gosh, that's too big. What are we going to do if the roof goes? So the numbers made sense. It's the same, you said, 4 walls and a roof, but because it had 18 as opposed to 6 doors, all of a sudden our brains just kind of
mental block. We're not there yet. We're not big enough and organized enough to do this yet. So,
and why not?
We underestimated what we're able to do. Yeah.
So I drive by them all the time. I almost bought them again. The guy, he called us. He said, "Can you manage them? I'm sick and tired." And I thought, here's my wedge in the door. I'm going to get them. And no such luck still.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Mel, I'm curious, what is your story, and how did you guys come together in like a unified business? Because you had properties before, you said, and Dave had his. So tell me your story.
Yeah, well, I was a single mom living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I knew that I wanted to change my life and provide a good future for my girls, and I knew that. Real estate would give that to me, right? Would provide that extra income. And I didn't have I did have a big plan back then, because back then when I met Dave, I told him I'm going to buy 10 properties by the time I'm 40, before I turn 40. And most people used to always tell me, well, that's crazy. That's, how are you going to do that? You're working full time. And Dave was like, all right, that's awesome. Like, let's do it. Right. So just a different mindset. And I think that's how we came together. So I wanted to, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but having Dave being strong-minded and like, all right, well, let's figure it out. Let's do it. And then by the time I turned 40, I had 24 properties. We had 24 properties. Nice. I guess you did some work in there too.
So how is the husband-wife dynamic duo that you guys are? How do you guys split up the roles and duties, and how do you try? And again, it's tough, but how do you effectively not step on each other's toes with what you're doing?
Yeah, and great question, Steve. And people will ask that all the time. How are you guys not just like cats and dogs all day long? It's because we understand each other's lanes, and there's things that I actually like doing that Mel doesn't, and vice versa. So I like finding deals. I like talking to accountants and lawyers and agents and really looking at how much of a lift we can get, like that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then Mel likes the marketing, the social media, kind of more of the personable aspect of, that type of thing.
Relationship with the vendors and all that. Yeah.
Like I'd rather look at the numbers than those types of things. So it really naturally progressed. We used to do everything together in that sense. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it's just, if a task came up, I'll do this. Oh, I'll do that. And then it kind of just naturally, we both kind of found our little niches.
I think what trusting each other's decision-making skills as well. And at first, of course, we both had to look at all the deals, and it was a decision we were making together. And now we're able to, sometimes it'll be like, oh, by the way, we're dropping conditions. All right.
Yeah. It's, there's a great book out there. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's called Rocket Fuel. And the author's name is Gino Wickman, who wrote Traction. And he talks about the
Traction. I've heard great things, Steve.
Yeah. And Rocket Fuel talks about the two leaders of a company always require two people. It requires a visionary and it requires the integrator. So just like in the business I had before we sold the property management company, I was the visionary. I was the one who was out in front. My business partner actually was the integrator, and he was the guy that was really making sure the business ran, right? But on the face of it, there's one. And it goes on to talk about the roles and the job and how you delineate the two. But also it talks about how every successful business that's ever existed, whether it was Disney, Ford, Boeing, there's always a visionary and there's always an integrator. And knowing those roles and respecting the other roles and staying, as you said, staying in your lanes is that really is the key, because it's not when times are good. We all know it's when times are bad to make sure that you stay in your lane. And, I remember when we had our business and I would talk to my business partner and I would start stepping in to help out. It was like, do what you do. I'll do what I do. And if I mess up, then it's on me, but you got to trust me and you got to trust the system. And it's hard, right? You outside looking in, you can see what you think is the problem because I've seen it for 3 minutes. So of course I know what's going on when he's been working on it for months. But it's very hard to be respectful of that lane. So how do you guys separate that from husband, wife?
And it's a great question. And I don't know if we really separate it. And I mean, I think it's kind of who we are, and it's part of, what we do. And it's different because it truly is our love and passion. We love real estate. We love growing our portfolio. We love what we do. And it's kind of part of it. I mean, it's even our kids are surrounded by it. And now it doesn't mean that, we don't do anything outside of that. Of course we do.
Sure.
We're always doing activities and all that, but it's always kind of a part of it. And I think the reason it works is because we have the same goals. Mm-hmm. We have the same 3 whys, Caitlin, Colton, Amy, right? So I think that's the reason why it really works for us, that at the end of the day, yes, it's what we do. We work full time together. We're married. We're always together, but it works because we're doing it at the end for both our whys, which are aligned.
And I think it would have been different, Steve, if we, let's say if we never had, not lives outside, but other jobs outside of this. Like if we had just kind of came into it and decided to start a business as our relationship started, but we both started with full-time careers, unionized pensions, the thing that everyone strives for. And we both said, let's leave that so that we can actually work on us and our business. So I think that's because we look back sometimes and we'll think, oh, it's already 4:30 in the afternoon. Like, I can't believe I wish I had more time. And we both look at each other like, remember before we'd be counting down the minutes like, oh, it's 4:30. When is it going to be 5?
Yeah.
So I think that really helps that we've had that past life and had that taste of working for someone else and now working for us. It's just fun. I don't know. It's different.
Yeah, I think that, what I always tell people is, motivation carries you through the first couple weeks of something new, right? That's the first booster rocket to get to outer space. It's your why, your North Star that keeps you going through good times, bad times, rainy days, things that's what keeps you going and you guys said it perfectly. It's the why. That's what makes you deal with all the stuff that you deal with, because when your why is stronger than everything else, it's that magnetic pull, I think, that will pull you through. And the fact that you guys are both, canoeing the same direction in the same canoe really helps, as opposed to, I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen with, people that are married is that, let's just say that the husband is going off on these seminars and reading books and he's doing all these things, and he comes back and he doesn't really share the information, maybe gives the spouse the brief digest of it, and it's thought of as a hobby, and the husband is thinking, this isn't a hobby, like this is our life, this is what we're doing. And I think that's where the divergence comes, and all of a sudden it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you spending all this time on it? I don't see you on the weekend. So the spouse doesn't really know what the other one's doing, because lack of communication, lack of goals, lack of having everything continual between each other. And I think that's a huge statement, but I think it boils down to communication. And I think you guys do communicate with each other, which is amazing, which is great. I'm curious with you two, you started with houses. Tell me some struggles that you guys, walk me through your life as owners of houses and your progression from there.
Well, my first one was a big mistake. I no longer own it. It all comes down to I didn't know what I didn't know, and I purchased a house, and I thought I'm going to make it granny suite downstairs, make it a duplex. So that's exactly what I ended up doing. The rent downstairs was completely redone. It looked beautiful. We rented it, and then one day, city comes knocking at the door and hands me over a paper saying that you have an illegal place and it needs to be shut down. So it's like, oh my gosh! After all that money put in. So that was my first mistake of numerous, but that was my first one. So then we ended up, it was a choice number wise. It didn't make sense to convert it back. So we sold it to somebody who could use it, because in our city, how it works, you could have somebody as part of your family living downstairs. Right. That's legal. So anyhow, we ended up selling that one.
It was literally a mother-daughter that we're going to split the house together. Yeah. So it
worked out
perfect buyer.
Yeah. So as you guys walked through, what was the plan of action? Because I think a lot of people buy one piece of real estate, maybe two, and they start to lose that why. They start to lose that momentum. It sounds like you guys are obviously picking up momentum, right? Because your why is strong enough and it's pulling you through. I would venture to guess. Talk me through how did you guys keep multiplying what you were doing?
And yeah, great question. And I think honestly, it was results. And that's what I always think when people mention to us, hey, I'm into it, but my spouse is not into it. I always think, I'm sure once you can show them what it works, like let's say you start cash flowing a property, $500 or $1,000 a month, and you start getting this passive income and you start doing that more and more. And all of a sudden you tell your spouse, hey, you can work 4 days a week as opposed to 5, or, hey, we're going to go on an extra trip to Disney World this year. Like I find those results when you get that and seeing and the thing that I love the most is seeing the kids when, hey, we're going to Disney again this year, and it's not us, it's our buildings paying for it. Like that, to me, that's priceless. And it's like, well, why don't we do this X amount of times a year? And so I think seeing results is it's momentum, right? It's just once you start getting some, why would you stop a good thing?
Yeah. And also setting the goal. So I was working full time at our local college here. Dave was a firefighter. And once we started seeing that income coming in, we're like, wait a second, if we buy another 10 properties, that's going to more than replace our income, our pensions, our benefits and all that. And I'm like, wow, we could completely change our lives here. So that's when we decided to go big and buy all those properties.
So what would you say is, to date, what was one of the biggest lessons? We'll call it failures, call it lessons. What would you, what pops into your head that just kind of gives your stomach a churn, that's something that you did that you could give advice to people not to do, or at least look at it as a lesson if they should happen to them?
Okay. And and everyone gets it. And it's naysayers. Oh my gosh. Naysayers can manipulate your mind so much. And your mindset has to be strong to be able to just kind of fend them off. Like I remember being at the fire hall, and you're there with a bunch of guys or girls, and you're there for 24 hours, and it is what it is. And I remember having naysayers and thinking, why am I buying all these buildings? What if the market crashes? What if the interest, and just kind of like shield. No, I have a game plan. I've done my cash flow analysis. And then even family members like, oh, don't you have enough? Aren't you happy? Or you're stressing yourself out. And then even people out, I have an uncle who went bankrupt doing this. Like, it's just get the noise away from you, have a plan and stick to it, and just do, what's right for you. The naysayers was, Mel and I had a lot of nights of upset stomachs and like, oh, maybe they are right. And looking back now, it's like, thank goodness we didn't listen to them. We just kind of kept going through the weeds and doing our thing. Like that's
absolutely, yeah. It certainly was a roadblock, and emotionally too. And maybe maybe we're not making the right decision. Maybe things are going to go bad. And
they know more than us. Yeah.
Exactly. And then one day, I can't remember who told me that, but they said, who are you taking your advice from? And I'm like, well, coworkers, whoever it was, Coinus said, well, you should start taking advice from highly successful people. People are way more successful than you are. And it just it just made complete sense, because when we talk to mentors, if we talk to you, Steve, you're just gonna be like, that's awesome, where are you at, keep growing, keep pushing through. And they have a completely different mindset because they have created that path already, right? Which I found very, very helpful, is realizing that who are you choosing to listen to.
And just to add on, Steve, when we came on the convo, we were saying we're working on our systems that'll help our staff, which you and I had talked to Melanie last year. You were flying out of somewhere. You were gracious enough to meet us in a hotel, talk to us from a hotel room. But why would I not listen to Steve, who is so successful with his property management business? And when I have naysayers around my city and that, I'm like, I choose to listen to someone who's highly successful and block them out, because who am I going to listen to? Steve, or someone who has got, 2 doors or whatever and is telling me how to do my business?
Yeah. I remember when I first started getting into real estate and talking to people, and, I think we want to ask our peers for affirmation that we're doing the right thing. We want to hear, yeah, you're doing the right thing. And, obviously that's not always the case. You get the opposite. And when you start hearing all the advice of things that people, kind of putting their arm around your shoulder saying, yeah, let me give you some advice that, and they're giving you this fatherly advice of what you shouldn't do. And I remember one time this guy was just giving me all the reasons that I shouldn't own real estate, the 2 a.m. toilet call that I've never ever gotten, but everyone knows about that. And, and I said, wow, so like you own properties and this happens to you? And he's like, oh no, I don't own real estate. And I'm thinking, wait, you don't own real estate? Like you don't own anything? And he's like, oh no, I'd never own it. I'm thinking, what? That's like me asking flying advice from someone who's never even been in the cockpit of an airplane. I'm thinking, why? And all of a sudden it just kind of clicked to me. And then as I started progressing, and as you said, you start getting around people, like-minded people, the one trend I always hear, as you do, is, who are you around? They say, if you make the most money and you're the smartest person of all of your friends, you need to find new friends, because you have basically capped yourself out. And I think a lot of people, we want that positive affirmations from the people that our peers are, but what got you to this point in your life, as you said, is not going to get you to where you want to go. So if I'm relying on people around me to propel me past, they don't know what I'm doing. And I think it's human nature that as much as we want to see people succeed, I think a lot of people deep down do not want to see you succeed. They want to affirm their personal beliefs that by them not taking action, they made the right decision, so that if you failed, they can go, see, Dave, I told you shouldn't have done it. I made the right decision.
And I can think of people that I know are hoping that I fail so they can say exactly the same thing. And it's sad, right, Steve? Like you're bang on.
It's so sad. And I think that you get around other, as we said right in the intro, when you get around other like-minded, success-driven people, they want you to succeed. They say, hey, how much have you made on this deal? I want to know. For me growing up, my parents, they're middle-class employee workers. You didn't talk about money. It just was not something that you talked about. But when you talk to wealthy people, they want to get into the nitty-gritty of numbers and finances. And I think what happens is people inherently, when you talk about money or your success or lack thereof, they feel that that's a report card or a grade on their ego or their knowledge or their self-worth. So if they don't want to talk about money, because that may show how ignorant they are on money and finances or on success. So they don't want to talk about that. And a lot of times what I've learned is, and this goes back to the systems, is we think that we should do everything ourselves, because if we outsource or leverage, it's to the common person, they think it's showing a weakness. And it's a mindset of saying, I don't know how to do it, so I'm weak. So I'm just going to do it myself and I'll keep it up here. But what they really don't realize is they become the most limiting factor of their growth and their financial success, because we know, as you said, Dave, you have a great skill set of the behind the scenes, not as much the front. I mean, obviously you do a lot of videos and you guys do a lot of education, but we all have our unique abilities of what we're good at and things that we're not good at. And I think that the quicker you can humble yourself to say, you know what, that's just not something I'm good at, doesn't mean I'm not going to succeed. It just means I'm going to hire the people to succeed at those things? How have you guys evolved in that process?
Oh yeah, that was certainly, we tried doing everything ourselves at first. Maybe not the renovation so much, although we did do what we could, but we were not very naturally handy people. But the property management, we tried doing everything, even when still working full time, 3 kids at home, and we had so many, 80 units or so. We're still trying to do everything on our own, but we were bottlenecked. Like, we're here, we could not grow anymore.
We were the self-limiting, like you said, right?
That's exactly. So we waited too long. I do not advise that. We waited too long to reach out to get extra help, probably because I'm a perfectionist and wanted everything. I wanted to control that control piece, right? Wanted to know that if I pick the tenant, I get to pick them. I know that, they should be good. And it kind of applied across everything. And then finally we got to the point where we couldn't grow anymore. And that's finally when we decided, wait a second, if we want to grow, we have a choice here. We can keep doing the same thing. And in a sense, it was almost a job because we couldn't grow anymore. Yeah. Or we can get a team, get the right people in the right place to help, property manager, somebody who takes care of the phone, financial control, all those different people in place. So that way, a VA, virtual assistant that Mr. Steve here hooked us up with.
That was super cool.
Yeah,
actually.
that was the first step. That was number one.
I remember thinking, like, what? We need a VA, Steve? Really? Come on. That's for like big course. And you're like, what? Everyone should have a VA.
I remember taking a university course and they talked about VAs and how they're great. And I thought to myself, again, that self-doubt or I remember thinking, well, there's no way I ever need a VA. I'm not big enough for that. And I remember telling myself that. And then anyhow, interestingly enough, we meet and we talk about VAs. But yeah, having everybody in place just freed our time. So we can keep doing what makes us money, but most importantly, we can keep doing what we're good at and what we love doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what happens a lot of times is at the evolution of your growth, of people's growth, is you go from operator to CEO. And so leaders. And so the leaders lead, they don't necessarily do. And it becomes first, maybe it's 1/10 of the time, then 2/10, then it slowly starts shifting. And what I explained to people, I said, your job right now, your role is to grow your business. It's to grow it. And so if I hired you to be the CEO of my company and say, we have numbers that we have to hit on the growth, it's not an option. This is what the board of directors wants. This is what you're hired to do. This is what you're doing. If you don't do it, I'm going to have to get rid of you. If you looked at it that way, you would be much more effective on a daily basis. If I said, every day, I want you to turn in what you've done with your KPIs and your metrics so that I know you're doing your job of growing the company. So if after a week, I got your KPIs and you said, Dave said, yeah, I was on site. I was dealing with this person. I was dealing with that. And I'm going to say, but that's not your job. Your job is to grow my business, not be in it. You hire people to do that because your job is this and you're not doing your job. And when you put it in that perspective, and I tell them, I said, if I hired you and you weren't doing your job, what do you think I would do eventually? The answer is I'd probably get rid of you. I'd fire you. That's the thing that most people misunderstand. When you own your business, you don't think that you can fire yourself because you own the business, which means a lot of times you are the bottleneck. You are the reason it's not actually growing because you're too busy driving the car through the rearview mirror, looking at everyone behind you, when your job is to look through the windshield and be the leader so that everybody follows you. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand the definition of a leader to the definition of a manager. So a leader or a manager has people do things because you say, I hired you, I'm going to manage what you do, and you have these tasks I need you to do. And that's your job. And if you don't do your job, I will fire you. A leader is the person that walks forward and everybody follows them because they're inspiring people with their vision, the goals, and they want to do it. So a manager makes them do it. A leader has people wanting to do it. And so a lot of times we think that being a manager is being a leader. And I don't agree. I think that people confuse that. And it's like, and then they confuse what their job is. Well, am I a manager or am I a leader? Well, which one grows the company? You grow it by inspiring people. Like you guys are such visionaries and you guys are always moving forward. I would say, and I'm not sure how you guys are running the business, but Your job is to be the cheerleader of getting people inspired to want to go to work. And look, people don't work for a paycheck. They work for a cause, and they work because they feel they're making a difference. 68% of the people will either leave working for you or they will leave as renters because they just think you don't care. Has nothing to do with the amount of money. It's because you're not inspiring them to want to stay either renting from you, working for you, whatever the case may be. Do you guys, in your evolution, have you guys ever thought about that?
This is so interesting. I love how you said that.
Yeah.
And
You're giving me ideas for team meetings tomorrow.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, literally earlier this morning, so maybe 2 hours ago, I was meeting with our administrator, and she said, I was on my way to work, and I heard the Bon Jovi song. I didn't even tell you this yet.
I don't know any of this.
It's My Life. And she says, I'm listening to it, and I just thought of you guys. Like, you should do a video on it with It's My Life. It's now or never. And that's how you guys are. That's what I think of you. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet and powerful. Cool. But absolutely, cool, I love how you're saying that. And yes, having the difference about, finding that purpose behind it and for people to really understand it. And I'm thinking right now as well, as even that self-reflection weekly, because we do KPIs with the team and everything, where we at, what did we accomplish, what's our future goals, but even we need to start doing it a little bit on ourselves, because are there certain tasks that Melanie and Dave should not be doing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, self-reflection, yes, there's still a task that we should not be doing. So I'm glad you said that, because I'm thinking, okay, I need to self-reflect a little bit more. What are the tasks that I'm still doing that keeps me inside as opposed to working on the growth?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's hard, right? When you own a business and you're running a business and it's your baby and you created it, you want to keep your hand in there, but sometimes you have to ask yourself, am I actually messing things up by putting my cape on and jumping in the middle of things as the hero? Because one thing you do is you teach the employees that basically, if I wait long enough, Mel and Dave will jump in. Like, I'll just wait. And so basically you're teaching them, they're not teaching you, you're teaching them that eventually you'll jump back in as the employee. But when you do that, what is the opportunity cost that you're losing as leaders because you're not growing? And it's not bad employees, it's normally bad leadership. Because good employees aren't hired, they're bred, right? They're made. They're made because of you guys giving them the vision and inspiring them to want to be better. And I'm sure you guys do a great job of that. But I would ask people, as you grow, you realize this has less and less to do when you're building wealth like you guys are doing. It has less and less to do with four walls and a roof, right? Now you guys are dealing with all these other things that really, it has nothing to do with that 18-plex, right? You could probably, if that 18-plex came on the market and the numbers were right, you'd probably get it, bring it into the fold, and just keep on working. So what you realize is it's not the four walls and the roof, it's a people business. And it's systems, and it's policies and procedures, and it's structure. And your job, as you guys keep getting up to the top of that pinnacle, is to be that leader to keep the machine moving. And it's very hard to do that unless you are intentionally making that shift, that's what I have seen. And I guess my question to you guys is, have you noticed yourselves doing that metamorphosis from worrying about the four walls and a roof and what's this and what's that to now thinking more on the ownership side?
Yes. And it's the more I started to notice that is because before, like Mel and I used to manage everything, is now I don't even. Before I used to know, oh, that's the unit number. Now I'm saying to the team, all right, guys, what tenant is this for what place? Or when people see me out and about, they'll say, oh, what places do you have for rent? I have no idea. And they're kind of looking at me and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm so far removed from it.
Yep.
Call the team, go on the website. I have no idea. I know my delinquency list because I get my reports, but that type of thing. So yes, I have noticed that more and more. Being hands off with that, but I do still catch myself. See, now that you're saying that, I'm thinking if I was to hire Dave as a CEO and the board of directors, I'm thinking of it yesterday and the day before. I went to an apartment to try and help the team out, and why the board would say, Dave, why are you doing that? Get back in the office and find us some more buildings and find us some more lenders. So I like that you say that because you just changed my mindset, and tomorrow Anyway, I've got an idea for tomorrow, but I would be mad at myself. I'd be like, what are you doing?
Well, I think what happens a lot of times is, especially with you and Mel, right? You guys are this dynamic duo and you're cheering each other on, right? And you're giving the high fives and you're trying to get people together. But, I heard a saying one time, the fish stinks from the head down, meaning if you're not holding each other accountable to get your stuff done, how do you hold your team accountable? They're going to go, well, you guys don't do it. Or maybe you guys show up late, or you guys have bad days, or this or that. So it's one of those things. What you do resonates down. If you're having a bad day, you might not think it, but everybody in the office knows you're having a bad day because it resonates from the top down. And you have to put on that suit of armor every day that you get up, and you are Dave, the CEO, and Mel, the owner of the business. You guys are the ones, and you got to put that suit on, and you've got to do the dance. Like, you have to be that person. You have to be on, because when you're not, it's showing a chink in the armor, and it starts giving doubt. And what happens a lot of times is when employees start losing faith, what happens a lot of times is, normally they've quit about 3 months before you either notice it and they quit on their own, or you have to fire them because of so many mistakes. But they don't just wake up one day and say, yeah, I think I'm going to quit today. I think I'm out of here. It's something that's been brewing and they've been setting it up or whatever. And you either know about it and chose to ignore it, or you're so bad at tracking what they do, you're not even paying attention to it. And so it's an interesting thing that now all of a sudden you're like, man, this was just houses. Now I'm dealing with KPIs and P&L statements and forecasting and this and that. But that's the natural evolution of the business, because, the definition of a business is a commercial, profitable enterprise that runs without you. So if Dave or Mel need to jump in and go and do these things, then you still have a job. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you can't call it a business until you can say, you know what, we can step away for 6 months. We can go down to the Caribbean. We can enjoy our time, and it's going to keep on keeping on. Maybe not as fast, but it's not going to implode.
Yeah.
And that's how you know that you've built a business structure that's operating. And it's not easy. It's tough, and again, I just know that when we were building our business and we brought in a business partner, that was one of the first things he said, so who do you guys turn your to-do lists into every day? And we were like, we don't. He said, why? He said, the board of directors wants to see what you're doing. And we were like, oh, okay. Now, we were still the board, but you change hats, right? Now,
Right.
do you guys ever do like board of director meetings where it's like quarterly, where you guys sit down, go over the minutes, the P&L, all that stuff, away from the house, away from everyone else? Do you guys ever do that?
Not like, no, not the way you're saying it, Steve. I love you're blowing my mind right now. The way to look at it, put on a different hat. Every time we chat, you blow my mind.
Yeah, I would, one of the things that we used to do, and maybe you want to do this, is, my business partner, myself, our spouses weren't in the business. So every quarter we would do a board of directors meeting where we would review last quarter's numbers. What are the goals? What are the goals for the year? What were the goals for the 90 days? Did we hit the goal? If we didn't, why not? Then we went over financials. Are we on track for the yearly goals for the forecast? So we actually had to explain it to each other. We wouldn't do it at our houses. We would go somewhere because we wanted it to be a business model and we wanted it to be the business mindset. And if sometimes this is actually when you have other people that are not invested in your business or whatever, but they're on the board. And that's why a lot of times you have board of directors, you have people that can give you input because they're from the outside looking in from a business perspective. And there's, like I've had people ask me to be on their board. They say, I just want you in there to ask questions. We want you to hold us accountable so that, they go, well, shit, we got a meeting with Steve and this other person. We got a board of directors meeting. We got to have our stuff together because it's going to be like, okay, present. Tell me what you did.
Right.
And it's not, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, what did Dave, the CEO, do? And are you doing your job? Because if not, then we have to have another discussion. Mm-hmm. And so it's just something, I don't know if you guys have ever thought of doing that. It may be something you guys look at doing, and it starts getting you to think on that level of, okay, this is a business. I have a board I've got to answer to, I've got to prepare the minutes. I've got to have the P&L statements. It's like, it's not just, high five, we did good. Now it's like Mel is going, hey, you got to get your shit together because we got a meeting next week and we got to present. and it just changes,
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, Steve, as you're talking about that, like our new controller, anyway, we're going to start doing this. You've inspired me to do this, but I'm thinking even bigger picture. How am I supposed to have KPIs and a role? Like, let's say if I do want to go to the Caribbeans and I want to do that more often than once a year, what if I want to have someone sitting in Dave's spot or someone sitting in Mel's spot, right? We should obviously start doing that while we're here so that way when we replace ourselves, we'll know exactly what to look for because we'll be sitting there asking those questions. I love that, Steve. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, for what you do, for each of you, Mel should have a job role, a job duty, a position contract. Like she's an employee of the business, right? I mean, even if she's a shareholder, whatever, you should have yours too. It should be, here's my job description, here's my roles, here's my KPIs. And you guys should be holding each other accountable once a week or whatever it is. You turn your KPIs into each other, and it's a non-negotiable. Right. And so that's one of those things that's when you really start getting into that groove of being that mastery of running the business through synergy and through team. Because all of a sudden, and what I would suggest, and this is just me, is you share these KPIs with the whole company so that it's transparent. So it's like, look, we're just like you guys. We have to be accountable too. We don't live in a glass house. Like you see everything that we're doing. So you know where the company's going. You know what the goals are. I don't know if you give people revenue shares or percentages, whatever, but all of a sudden they feel like they're a part of it because now they're like, okay, they're doing it too. Like they're out there grinding. They're doing something different, but they're doing their part to grow the company. And that's where it's like, okay, and again, it depends on where you're going. I know you guys have huge goals and you guys are knocking them out, but I think what'll happen over time is the business will outgrow you. And when me and my business partner were building our business, that was a challenge for us. Like we had to keep growing because, our business coach told us, our mentor, he said, listen, guys, he said, to grow a $5 million business, he said, pretty much anybody can do that with enough hard work and focus and stuff. But he said, you are not by chance going to go from 5 million to a 10 million to a $50 million company by accident. He said, that is going to be through intention and focus. And he said, the other thing I'll tell you is he said, when you go from 5 million to 10 million, he said, everything that you have done up to that point will break. Your systems will break. Your employees will break. Everything will break in front of you. That your job as leaders is actually to rebuild this as quickly as you can for the team. Find the breaks, fix them. Find the breaks, fix them, rebuild them, buy new systems. Because when you have that much flow of business, like say your vacant units, right? It's like, okay, well, we were getting 100 calls a month. Now we're getting 2,000 calls a month. What phone system do we have to take all those calls and who's answering those calls? Right. So it's like you have problems that you didn't think of that would happen. Now it's like we used to have 20 maintenance tickets a month. Now we have 300. Okay, who handles that? And so you have a different level and different set of problems. But just going back to what you're saying, if you don't know what you're doing right now and you can't track it, you definitely can't leverage it, outsource it, or systematize it to someone else if you can't explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I love it, Steve.
That's great.
Kind of turned into a coaching session, I guess, but didn't mean to.
Hey, you know what? We'll have an audience for it, so it's perfect. I love it.
We can all learn. That's awesome.
No, you're blowing my mind. I love that you're changing my thought process on some stuff.
No, that's fantastic, and we've certainly, and you are bang on. I can think of so many things, even throughout the growth that like phone systems, like before we could just go on our cell phones. It was good enough, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait a second, like. Everybody needs an actual phone and, all that kind of extensions and all that.
It sounds simple, but you still have to implement it, think about it. And
it's from not having it to having it and a emergency line and extra.
And it's like, and then, you go into software, then you go into storage of all the data. Then you got to say, okay, is this encrypted? Am I protecting, I've got people's social security number, I've got their information. How am I protecting that information? Am I setting myself up for liability if somebody breaks into my system and they get their info? It's like all of a sudden you've got all these challenges and you're like, man, we never really thought about that before. And, we used to think about that because we had to, we were managing 1,000 properties. You got a lot of vital information from people, social security numbers, bank account information. We had to make sure we protected all of that. It had all that being encrypted, and then what software do we have for viruses and just things you don't even think about. You're like, this has nothing to do with owning a rental property,
And Steve, funny you say that because right now we're getting new servers and the internet guys talking to me, and I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. Just make it safe. But it's funny that you're saying this because we're going through this, and that's what we thought is, what if someone, and here in Canada, it's a social insurance number, same difference, social security. So I'm like, what if someone steals the SINs? What if they steal their credit? Sometimes we have their driver's license, their credit card number. And I'm like, Dave's getting lawsuits, So it's funny that you say that because we're going through that right now with servers and data and blah, 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 which I just want to buy buildings, but this all comes.
It comes with it. What's interesting as well, and learning from past mistakes and whatnot, is that this time we were able to somewhat project the upcoming changes. We're closing on a lot of deals this month. Our portfolio is growing. It's going to, over a couple of weeks, 70 extra doors. That's a lot of doors. So we had meetings. We kind of backtracked. Said, okay, what do we need as opposed
last time?
As opposed to being reactive. This time we're being proactive. All right, let's have a meeting. Let's make some lists. What do we need? What do we need for team members? What do we need for software changes? What do we need server? All
maintenance
these different
tickets, big one, right?
All those things. So that way, again, I'm not saying there won't be any surprises, of course, once we do, but at least between now and then, we have 3 weeks to make sure things are happening. And even before that, when we knew that they were likely to close, is having those conversations, building our team, making sure that we have everybody in place. So that way it's not like, oh my gosh, now what? And being completely reactive as opposed to proactive.
Yeah. And one of the things, like I remember when we were challenged, as you grow, you may say, okay, up to, for every 50 new doors that we get, we have to hire this person. So you have to figure out what that formula is, because you say, okay, or let's just say, let's say every time you buy 50 properties, you have to hire an employee. So that means that at maybe 35 properties, you got to start looking. You got to find someone by 40 properties. You got to train them by 45 so that they're on board at 50. And then what does that do to your P&L? So we would have to forecast out, like we knew that every 175 doors that we brought on, we had to start adding certain staff members. We knew maintenance was always first. Then we had to have assistants. So we had to project that out. So when we would forecast out our growth, because it's got to be intentional, when we'd forecast our yearly growth, we had to know where our triggers were that we had to start interviewing. And then when we have to hire them by, and what the number, because all of a sudden, once you hire that person, now you're taking a hit on your P&L statement for the business. So now you got to say, okay, we're going to take a hit, but by the forecast is by this time we should be back up. But by this time we got to hire another person. So it's, as long as, and so it would get very frustrating because all of a sudden you're making a lot of money in the business and then you got to hire an employee. And what we learned was from our business coaches, the one question he'd always ask us is this part of the plan? And we're always going according to the plan, to our goal. And so the answer was yes. And he says, if it's part of the plan, then careful the story you tell yourself, because you're telling yourself a story. Normally it's self-limiting belief. It's always worst case. Because, whenever we think of something that's not good, our brain always goes to worst case scenario. It always does, right? Because our brains are taught to protect ourselves. So the way it protects ourselves is it tells us what the worst thing could happen. And that's what we focus and dwell on. And when you focus and dwell on something, that's what happens, because that's what we're focused on, right? And so we had to learn to change the stories that we told ourselves and the thought process to say, this is part of the plan. Don't get emotional at the sidetracking of a couple of months. We're moving towards something. And I remember we'd have like our expenses were maybe, for our business, let's say there were $80,000 a month. And my business partner would say, man, we got a lot of money going out. And our business coach would say, I hope it's $1 million soon. I hope you guys have $1 million a month, because that just means your business is growing that fast that you're doing something right, as long as you're still going according to your plan. Right. And so it was something that really, I don't know if that helps you guys, but that's something that resonated with us, to always ask that question. Is this part of the plan or is it not? Right. And that helped us. So as we kind of finish up here, tell me, what is the future for you guys? Tell me, what does 2020 and 2021 look like?
Yes, well, we love real estate. We're continuing to grow. So we have some other deals as well under contract. We also mentor people across North America. So, and we love that. It's our passion. And so continuing to help other real estate investors get started as well with their investing journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Do you think the education will overtake the assets, or are they in tandem, or what's the goal?
They are in tandem. the love is there for both. Like it's so fun to help people starting out or in their roadblocks. Like it's almost rejuvenating, right? Helping them and then appreciate. Well, like when you help us, I'm sure it feels good, right?
Yeah.
But like, you know what I mean? It's so cool to help people and networking and building that. So that feels really good, to be honest. And then also buying buildings is still our love as well. Like we love closing buildings and knowing we're giving it to our kids. So as long as the love and the income and the assets keep going, I'm sure they'll both stay neck and neck. They might have their races and their ties, but probably the assets will always supersede it. But
yeah, the assets are nice because they keep paying no matter what, and you're building generational wealth with the assets, as opposed to, you know, you may be financially doing good with the other thing, but it's not necessarily generational, and it requires Mel and Dave to be present to get the people, as opposed to a business model that Mel and Dave can be in the Caribbean enjoying a year vacation and not have to coach anyone. So there's that, you know.
And I do love that they're intertwined as well, right? Because continuing to grow our portfolio, we're only able to continue to provide, you know, advice and just from, you know, when it was COVID, for example, or when there's changes with funding or whatever it is, because we're still hands-on with investing, we're able to coach them accordingly because we're continuing to go through those
boots on the ground, right? We're doing it ourselves. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I as always, man, I always so thoroughly enjoy hanging out and chatting with you guys, and you guys are an inspiration. You guys are all over social media, and I really admire what you're doing. You guys should be very proud of what you've accomplished, because you definitely are an inspiration out there, and I hope you guys keep doing this, and I hope you keep inspiring people, because I've had some success in my life, but I'm also inspired by you both, because I think what you're doing is helping people, to me, is the true way of giving back. And I know you really do help a lot of people. And I don't know if you hear it a lot, but you definitely are making a difference out there. And so I commend you guys for doing that. And it's not once or twice. You guys are out there all the time, consistently out there doing stuff. So I think it should be, you know, noted and commended. So, you know, congratulations.
Thank you
on that. Congratulations on all of your success and future endeavors. I'm sure you guys are going to be on the radar even more than you've been so far. If somebody wants to find you guys online, social media, how do they find you?
Yeah, so we're all over Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and it's always Investor Mel Dave. So if they search for that, they'll be able to find us. Yes, Investor Mel Dave.
Great. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. For those of you that are interested in property management here in the U.S., Mynd Property Management, we are managing properties in 19 investable markets. If you are looking to be an investor and you want to know either what to do or transfer your properties or just have a conversation, you can go to our website at mynd.co, MYND.co. There you got a whole list of things that you can look at in different markets, different strategies. Find the latest COVID information and what laws have changed, because these are ever-changing laws, as we stated earlier. So please go to our website, take a look. We'd love to help you out. On behalf of Mel and Dave, myself, and Mynd Property Management, thank you for watching, and we will catch you guys next time on The Mindful Investor. Bye-bye.